Okay, I'm going to start this meeting. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the February 22, 2022 meeting of the Southeast Chapter of the Native Plant Society of New Jersey. We're glad to have you all here. Some of you logged on early, which is fine. We'll be introducing our speaker tonight is Becky Laboy. I'll be introducing her in a few minutes. I've got to make a couple of announcements first, but we're glad to have all of you out there tuning in. Thanks for joining us. I want to say a little bit about the upcoming Native Plant Society of New Jersey annual conference. It's going to be online. You've got several excellent speakers, starting off with Doug Talame, The Nature of Oaks. He's just published, that's his newest book. He's the guru of our chapter and probably the guru of most of the chapters of NPSNJ. He's the man that seemed to kick off a lot of people's interest in growing native plants and saving habitats. And we've got some other speakers coming too. You can go to the NPSNJ.org website to register. It's Saturday, March 5th. There's other events besides the 4 speakers. You can read about them on the website. I want to say a little bit about our chapter. We ordinarily meet at Stockton back before the pandemic struck on the 3rd Monday of 8 months of the year. We've been running webinars since I guess it was started in May of 2020. We started doing webinars. We've had a couple of outdoor events, and I'm going to describe the next 2 in a moment. I want to say a few things about the that you need not be a member of NPSNJ to come to a meeting, our chapter meetings, or to attend a webinar. The webinar. Sorry, everyone. We're trying to get on 2 different laptops at our house and had a little problem with the mic. I didn't show the slide, but I'll just say it. Our next 2 meetings are going to be outdoor meetings, no Zoom. We're going to go back to the outdoors for a change of pace. We're having a meeting in March. Our March 22, 2022 meeting is going to be a field trip to Estelle Manor Park, celebrating the coming of spring by searching for spring. Estelle Manor is a place we've been to before several years ago in the fall. We took our group out there, had a great time. There's great diversity of plants and animals, and we're going to be looking for some early spring observations. Pine warblers will be singing by then. Butterflies will be flying. We might even hear a yellow-throated warbler, which is a rare southern warbler that nests at Estelle Manor. There'll certainly be some plants leafing out. Maybe we might get leatherleaf and a few other things that will be blooming by then. We will send out the announcement of that meeting in early March. We haven't figured out the exact time and date. It's going to be a Saturday or Sunday in late March, depends on a couple of variables. In April, we're going to have a second field trip, also still under the planning stages. We're going to have a field trip to some backyard habitats locally that feature spring ephemerals and also shade gardening. That'll be a field trip we'll be announcing in early April on Constant Contact. So those are the 2 things coming up for our chapter. We will be sending out information to through Constant Contact to anyone who's gone to the NPSNJ site and click the button that says you're interested in our chapter. So we hope we get some people out to that. We'll be sending out more information about both those meetings as we get them more fully planned. So I'm going to now introduce Becky, we're really glad to have her here tonight. She's an educational outreach specialist for Ocean County Soil Conservation District. She has over 20 years of experience working as an educator in both formal and informal education and natural science settings. She holds an MA in education, a BS in environmental biology, and a BA in international relations. There's a nice little combination of specialties. She enjoys landscaping her own yard to attract and support birds and wildlife, and strives to inspire others to make small but positive changes in home landscaping practices for a healthier planet. If you have questions, once Becky's talk starts, if you had questions, please put them in the chat box. Barbara Fiedler, Jesse, and I will be sorting through those so we can post them to Becky at the end of her talk, and we'll have a little Q&A to follow this discussion. So if you have a question as we go through this, just post it in the chat box, and we will try to find the best questions. Maybe we'll get to all the questions. Anyway, Becky, you're on. Thanks for being here. Thanks for coming. We're looking forward to this.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much to Jack and Jesse Connor, and thank you to Steve and Barbara Fiedler, to the Southeast chapter, everyone who's out there tonight. Thank you all so much for joining me for my program this evening, which is called Trees and Shrubs for a Jersey-friendly winter wildlife garden. So I will begin the show. So what do I mean by Jersey friendly? Jersey friendly yards is a comprehensive online guide to landscaping for a healthy environment and for a healthy New Jersey. The website, jerseyyards.org, offers gardeners opportunities to find lots of great information and tools and resources for planning and designing your garden. It offers information about how to test your soil, best practices for managing plant pests, and steps for creating a wildlife-friendly garden. The website also includes an extensive plant database consisting of over 400 different plants that support healthy landscapes. So visit often as we continue to introduce new plants to the database. And there is much to read and learn on the Jersey Friendly Yards website. Again, it's www.jerseyyards.org. The Jersey Friendly Yards website was developed by the Barnegat Bay Partnership through a grant from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, the NJDEP. And the Barnegat Bay Partnership, we call BBP, is a national estuary program, an NEP, one of only 28 NEPs across the entire country, legislated into existence by Congress with the goal of protecting the estuaries in the Barnegat Bay watershed. And New Jersey is actually really lucky. We have 3 NEPs in our small state out of 28 in the entire country. Along with BBP, there is the Harbor Estuary Program that straddles New Jersey and New York, as well as the Delaware Estuary Program that covers the regional coastal area in South Jersey and Delaware. The Jersey Friendly Yards website was created to address a problem occurring in our estuaries called eutrophication. Eutrophication is the overgrowth of algae in our local water bodies, including our bays, rivers, and the stream that's not too far from your home. Eutrophication is caused by the overload of nutrients, so fertilizer nutrients, from stormwater runoff. The Jersey Friendly Yards website is designed to provide gardeners like ourselves and landscapers information and tools to create a yard, garden, or landscape that is healthy to the environment, healthy to people and healthy to wildlife. And as the education outreach specialist for Ocean County Soil Conservation District, I feel very lucky to be able to work with Barnegat Bay Partnership to address this issue by educating the public about the website and share information about how to create a beautiful, healthy, and Jersey-friendly yard. And on behalf of the district, I offer a variety of educational programs that hopefully inspire others to make small yet important changes in their own landscaping practices that protect and enhance soil, conserve water, and rebuild backyard ecosystems that reflect the native landscape that is so vital to plants and wildlife. I also write grants to receive funding to design and install Jersey-friendly gardens within our Barnegat Bay watershed, to act as demonstration gardens for the public. And the district is a proud partner in the Jersey Friendly Yards initiative, spearheaded by the Barnegat Bay Partnership and in collaboration with Rutgers Cooperative Extension. And everyone who is watching tonight, we invite you to join us in our efforts to create healthy communities by creating a Jersey-friendly yard. So today we will be discussing trees and shrubs for a Jersey-friendly winter wildlife garden. Trees and shrubs are important components of our natural world. Trees and shrubs are the major component in the natural semblance of our New Jersey forests. New Jersey's wildlife depend on trees and shrubs for their basic needs, including food, water, shelter, and a place to raise their family. In this program, I'll highlight specific tree and shrub species that would make great additions to a Jersey-friendly yard like yours. And I'll showcase some important connections between trees and shrubs and wildlife. Trees and shrubs provide many services to humans, which scientists call ecosystem services. We literally could not live without these services. It's easy to forget that trees and shrubs produce oxygen in mass quantities, which we of course need to breathe. They pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and store it as wood. This is increasingly important as we try to combat climate change. Trees and shrubs provide us with food. Almonds, peaches, and blueberries are some of my favorites. Trees supply us with construction materials for our homes and our furniture. Trees and shrubs provide the catalyst for many modern medicines. Trees and shrubs offer sought-after shade on a hot, sunny day and insulation on cold days, and can even lower our cooling and heating bills. They provide windbreaks and living privacy fences. Humans also benefit from the emotional support of trees and shrubs, as evidenced by a rejuvenating walk in the woods. Trees and shrubs increase the value of your home. The value of trees and shrubs to humans is almost immeasurable. These same services that trees and shrubs provide to humans also service wildlife. It's no wonder you want to add trees and shrubs to your yard. New Jersey has so many native species to choose from. In fact, New Jersey is part of a contiguous biome that stretches across the eastern United States called the Eastern Deciduous Forest Region. It consists predominantly of deciduous broadleaf trees such as oak, maple, birch, beech, hickory, basswood, just to name a few. These trees have leaves that drop from the branches in the fall, an adaptation allowing for the tree to conserve water and energy in the winter. The Eastern Deciduous Forest region also has conifer trees, including hemlock, spruce, fir, and pine. although they are outnumbered by the broadleaf deciduous trees. An exception in New Jersey is the Pine Plains within the Pine Barrens region of our state, where there are vast forests of pitch pine. This map, created by E. Lucy Braun and published in 1950, depicts the original forest patterns. And notice northern New Jersey and southern New Jersey are two different colors. The blue area representing the oak chestnut forest runs through the northern half of New Jersey, and the oak pine forest dominates in our southern half of our state. And unfortunately, we lost the American chestnut tree to the chestnut blight many years ago, which completely changed our forests. These large forest regions are further divided into smaller plant communities containing different compilations of trees and shrubs and vines and wildflowers and grasses and ferns and ground covers based on other conditions such as the amount of water available, the relief or topography of the land, meaning how flat or sloped it is, proximity to the ocean or the river, soils, and other factors. And if we take a closer look at New Jersey's geology, we can see why there are some big differences in plant communities in the north as compared to the south. New Jersey is divided into 4 main physiographic regions. In the north, there is the Ridge and Valley, the highlands just below it, then the Piedmont, and then all of South Jersey is part of the coastal plain. And the coastal plain can be further divided into the intercoastal plain, a thin corridor along the Delaware River, which heads northeast, cutting the state in half, and the outer coastal plain covering the Pine Barrens and reaching the bay and ocean. And although New Jersey is a small state, I really can't emphasize enough how diverse New Jersey really is in terms of its plant communities. A diversity of plants supports a diversity of wildlife. And with that in mind, let's explore some trees and shrubs that will make good additions to our wildlife garden in winter. Winter is a special time of year when nature's beauty sparkles. This year, winter officially began on December 21st, the day that marks the winter solstice, the moment when the Earth's North Pole reached its maximum tilt away from the sun. The first day of winter is also known as the shortest day of the year, or the day with the fewest hours of sunlight. From December 21st onward, the days grow longer, with more minutes of sunlight added each day until we reach the summer solstice on June 22nd, the longest day of the year, when the Earth's North Pole reaches its maximum tilt toward the sun. From then on, we begin to lose a few minutes of sunlight each day until the calendar again reads December 21st or 22nd. The winter solstice is a celebration of light. Sunlight is a necessary component for all life on Earth to exist. It is also vital for plants to have adequate sunlight in order to photosynthesize. Different plants require a certain number of hours of sunlight for proper growth and function. Sunlight is also important to the survival of animals. More hours of daylight provides more time for wildlife to forage for food. Limited sunlight in the winter means limited time for foraging. As a wildlife gardener, you can turn your yard into a refuge for wildlife in winter. And as with any garden, a wildlife garden starts with the plants. Selecting appropriate native plants that provide direct benefits to wildlife is a wildlife gardener's #1 priority. In winter, animals need food and shelter. Trees and shrubs provide the foundation of a productive landscape for winter wildlife. So I'm going to introduce you to some beneficial tree and shrub species that offer food and shelter in the winter months, supplemented with some ideas for offering food at feeders and other types of shelter and protection. The best teacher to consult when learning how wildlife survives the cold winter months is Mother Nature. A walk in the quiet winter woods reconnects us with nature and reacquaints us with the animals who live there. Their identities are revealed by the tracks they leave in the snow. Raccoon, chipmunk, squirrel, sparrow. The plants provide the basic needs for the survival of wildlife in winter. Pine trees produce cones, which hold protein-rich seeds encased within a perfect protective package. And with the right tools to extract them, the seeds are an excellent source of energy for wildlife. This red-breasted nuthatch uses her tiny tweezer-like bill to ever slightly lift the scales cone and pull out the seeds. And this native red squirrel gnaws off the scales with her sharp teeth one at a time to find a nutritious snack. The numerous layers of thick bark on the pine tree provide refuge for overwintering insects. But this red-bellied woodpecker has just the right tools to locate and extract. He clings to the trunk with his strong feet and sharp talons. He uses his tail as a brace, and the tips of his wings overlap, keeping his body compact and balanced. He taps with his strong pointy beak and extends his long sensitive tongue beneath the bark and carefully feels for his prey. And once located, his sticky tongue pulls out the protein-rich morsel. By fall, the Eastern Red Cedar, a common evergreen tree in New Jersey woodlands, is loaded with berry-like cones, which feed numerous species of birds, including the American robin. And the fish crow, an endemic bird of the United States found nowhere else on Earth. This young cedar waxwing is benefiting from the abundance of berries produced by Eastern Red Cedar, the tree for whom it is named, and yellow-rumped warblers. Flocks of yellow rumps congregate in Eastern Red Cedar, gorging on the berries to maintain body fat for their migratory journey. Many yellow rumps complete their journey south here in New Jersey and spend the winter months in our backyards. Many bird species depend on this tree's berries for food in the winter. And when the berries are abundant and persist throughout the colder months, the birds in turn provide the important service of seed dispersal, insurance for woodlands. This tree is common in both the coastal plain region of New Jersey, along the coast on barrier islands, and in the uplands of both northern and southern New Jersey. Not only is it native throughout our state, its nativity extends the entire eastern half of the United States. It is one of the first trees to occupy disturbed soils, making it an early successional tree. And although it will tolerate some shade as a sapling, it needs sunlight as it matures. It also makes a lovely native privacy border or natural fence for a yard. The evergreen boughs of Eastern Red Cedar provide a shield from snow and insulation from the cold. This tree offers a safe place for this northern saw-whet owl to have a peaceful meal. Without evergreens such as this one, small owls and other songbirds would be vulnerable to cold temperatures at night, vulnerable to inclement weather, and vulnerable to predators, including the many raptors that actively hunt in our woodlands and in our yards in the winter. One of the most ubiquitous and important native trees of New Jersey is the mighty oak. This particular specimen, named the Salem Oak after the county in which it once resided, was a champion tree in New Jersey until its death in 2019. The species is Eastern White Oak. It was more than 100 feet tall with a trunk circumference of 22 feet and a crown spread of 104 feet. It was over 500 years old, much older than the expected lifetime of a white oak tree, which is between 100 and 200 years old. The longevity and the majesty of white oaks is also appreciated by wildlife. Large old trees provide shelter for wildlife and a nesting place for owls who raise their owlets during the winter months. In fact, you may be hearing the hooting of a great horned owl outside your window this time of year, late at night or in the early hours of the morning, as mated pairs call for each other and declare their territories. All oaks produce acorns, which are food for lots of wildlife, including wild turkeys, ruffed grouse, blue jays, squirrels, deer, and others. Blue jays gather and cache acorns in the fall, building up their storage in preparation for the winter. Not all of their acorns they hide are refound. This leads to the propagation of new oak trees. One study concluded that through the stashing of acorns, blue jays single-handedly reforested New Jersey's oak tree population after most of the trees were harvested for lumber in the 18th and 19th centuries. Willow oak is one of my favorite oak species. I have several growing in my yard of various ages. Willow oak is predominantly a southern New Jersey species, with the Piedmont coastal plain border defining its northernmost range. It has an unusual, very un-oak-like shape to its leaves, a single narrow blade similar to the shape of a willow. This blue-headed vireo is gleaning caterpillars and other insects from this large willow oak. Its golden fall colors are stunning. If your goal is to support wildlife in your yard, the oak is your tree. According to Dr. Doug Tallamy, author of the book Bringing Nature Home, oak trees are host to over 500 species of caterpillars, including the polyphemus moth. In the fall, polyphemus moth caterpillars curl up within the leaves to pupate or spend the winter. They start out this tiny, and after they undergo metamorphosis, they emerge as a beautiful polyphemus moth. The 500 species of caterpillars that use oak as their host plant spend the winter burrowed in crevices under the bark or curled up in leaves. And in the spring, these tiny caterpillars provide an important source of food for hungry migrating songbirds who are desperate for food as they make their long journey north to breed, like this northern parula, a species of warbler. They depend on the numerous tiny caterpillars found on oak trees to provide them with the fuel they need to sustain their energy for their long trip. Gray tree frogs also benefit from oak trees. They spend most of their time high in the trees and are well camouflaged to blend in with the bark. It leaves the safety of the trees in spring to breed in nearby ponds and will readily accept a man-made pond, a vernal pool, or basin located within deciduous or mixed oak pine woodlands. By creating appropriate habitat in your yard, you can attract this tiny and special creature. In the winter, gray tree frogs survive freezing temperatures by producing a chemical called glycerol, which acts as an antifreeze, allowing them to maintain interior metabolic processes at a very slow rate. The gray tree frog hibernates in the winter by burying themselves beneath logs, leaves, or under the soil, reminding us that it's not necessary to pick up every fallen branch nor rake up every leaf. Find a place for leaves and logs in your garden as natural decor. This Jersey-friendly gardener collects old logs and purposefully arranges them in her yard to create habitat for wildlife. The bugs chewing the wood and decomposing the logs offer food for birds, such as termites, ants, and grubs. And these insects break down the carbon molecules. The result is nutrient-rich compost for your garden. Gray birch is one of several birch trees that are native to New Jersey. These small trees reach maximum heights between 20 to 40 feet. They maintain a slender trunk and a narrow crown and have a relatively short lifespan of 15 to 30 years. But even after they are no longer standing, they continue to provide shelter and protection for wildlife. This common nighthawk pretends she's a gray birch tree during the day. No leaves are needed to help her hide. The gray camouflage colors of the bark conceal her presence from predators. The river birch is a commonly cultivated tree. Its distinctive and attractive orange peeling bark is visible and colorful in the winter, offering interest to your winter garden. River birch grows to heights between 40 and 70 feet, is often multi-trunked, has a vase-shaped growth habit and a rounded crown. It is a vigorous and fast-growing tree, prefers moist, acidic soils, and either full sun or part shade. It is the most adaptable of the native birches and can tolerate dry soil, heavy clay, heat, drought, deer, and pollution. This beautiful tree volunteered in my yard, most likely a gift from the birds. It is a sweetgum tree. Sweetgum is a typical plant of the swamps and floodplains of the Piedmont and the hardwood swamp forest of the intercoastal plain, where the soil is rich. However, this tree can be found growing throughout our state. New Jersey is the northern border of its range, which stretches south to Florida and west to Texas. And my property is neither in a floodplain nor a swamp, and this sweetgum is healthy and happy in my dry, sandy soil. It actually tolerates a wide range of soil conditions, except for alkaline soils. It needs full sun and is intolerant of shade. It is a conical shape when young, as you can see here, but grows a rounded crown as it ages. It is considered a medium to large tree and will reach a height of about 60 to 75 feet. And it has a straight trunk. This tree is easily recognized by its stems, leaves, and fruits. The leaves are star-shaped with 5 to 7 pointed, fine-toothed lobes. They turn amazing yellow and purple and red and orange colors in the fall. And branches and stems have wing-like corky ridges, which are very helpful when identifying this tree in the winter woods. Sweetgum trees are considered monoecious. They have separate male and female flowers, but both are found on the same tree. So all trees will have fruit. And on the top are the male flowers, the staminate flowers containing the stamen and the pollen. And hanging down are the female flowers, the pistillate flowers containing the sticky stigma ready to receive the pollen. The female flowers are termed capitulate, which means there are many very small flowers all attached at the same point on the flowering stem. The female flowers are wind pollinated, The wind blows the pollen from the male flowers on top to the female flowers on the bottom, after which the male flowers wilt and fall to the ground and the female flowers mature. The ovary swells into a pointy gumball fruit, protecting both the fertile seeds where the pollen successfully fertilized the flowers and also the unfertilized seeds whose flowers were not successfully pollinated. However, both seeds contain nutrients for the birds that eat them. And right in the center of this photo is a female red-winged blackbird foraging in a sweetgum tree. And to the bottom right is a photo of the more recognizable male showing off his red shoulder patch called an epaulet. And along with red-winged blackbirds, finches, chickadees, wrens, sparrows, quail, chipmunks, and many other birds and wildlife eat the seeds of the sweetgum tree. And this is an enormously important food source for birds in the winter. Once the gumballs fall, birds scratch the snow-covered ground, searching for tiny seeds. And if you need more convincing to consider a sweetgum to include in your wildlife-friendly yard, it is also a host plant for more than 30 species of butterfly and moth caterpillars, including this gorgeous Luna moth that pupates in the leaves during winter. This spice bush is at the top of my list of beautiful wildlife-friendly shrubs for winter gardens. Spice bush prefers part shade and also tolerates heavy shade, so it makes a great understory plant and only grows between 6 to 12 feet tall with a 6 to 12 foot spread. And female plants produce red drupes that ripen in fall, providing a fall and winter food source for birds. And spice bush is a host plant for the spice bush swallowtail caterpillar, pictured left, and the eastern tiger swallowtail caterpillar. The spice bush swallowtail pupa on the right is attached to a leaf where it will spend the winter. The leaf will drop from the tree, so the caterpillar and its leafy winter home will become part of the leaf litter. Another important reason to leave the leaves. And in March, when winter's grip begins to loosen, small yellow flowers begin to open, providing nectar for early emerging insects. Spice bush swallowtail is a gorgeous butterfly to attract to your yard with the proper trees and shrubs and leaves. And this beautiful Cecropia moth is drying its wings on the bark of its host plant, wild black cherry. It is too often a casualty of raked, blown, mowed, and discarded leaves. It too spends the winter wrapped in leaves of its host plant. Leaves of the black cherry contain toxic cyanide-forming compounds. Cecropia moth caterpillars are specialists who co-evolved with the black cherry and are able to eat and digest the leaves without harm, similar to the mutualistic relationship between monarch caterpillars and toxic milkweed. Native cherry trees, such as this one, are much touted by Dr. Doug Tallamy, as was the oak. The Cecropia moth caterpillar is a beautiful shade of green marked with blue and orange and yellow. And they can grow quite large, like this one measuring over 4 inches. The strikingly beautiful Cecropia moth is a sight to behold when emerging in the spring. As I stated earlier, caterpillars feed the birds, such as this black-throated green warbler, who is perched on an American holly, another native tree that provides shelter and food for wildlife throughout much of the year, and is especially important as a winter food source. It is an easily recognizable evergreen tree with broad evergreen leaves. Interestingly, most holly species in North America are shrubs, and most are deciduous. American holly, Ilex opaca, is a dominant tree in many forest communities throughout New Jersey. However, New Jersey is at the northern border of its range, which stretches south into Florida and west into Texas. It is considered a small to medium tree, reaching heights of 20 to 40 feet, and it has a conical upright shape and smooth pale bark. And American holly trees take a long time to grow. So this is the perfect year to plant a holly tree for future generations of birds and bees and children to enjoy. And it is also dioecious. So there are plants with only male flowers called staminate flowers, and there are plants with only female flowers, the pistillate flowers, and those are the ones that bear the fruit. Tiny greenish white flowers bloom on each year's new growth on both the male and female trees. And the flowers are extremely attractive to pollinators. And in early spring, when the flowers are in bloom, I can literally hear the whole entire tree buzzing from the sound of small native bees and other tiny beneficial insects looking for pollen and nectar. And the female flowers give way to the fruit that starts off green, turns yellow in late summer, and ripens to red in fall. And this blue-gray gnatcatcher comes north to breed, and many raise their families in New Jersey, where they can glean caterpillars and other insects from Native American holly trees. The red berries persist throughout the winter, offering a crucial food source for many different birds. Flocks of American robins, numbering in the hundreds and even the thousands, scour the woods in winter looking for holly berries. Not only do trees provide fruits and nuts and berries and seeds, they also provide perches from which raptors can hunt and also dine. It's always exciting to see a raptor in the yard. Having a species in the yard representing the top of the food chain tells me that I'm on the right track with creating a healthy ecosystem, starting with the right plants. One of the most exciting winter bird watching experiences in my yard is our eastern screech owl. Because we lack old trees with large cavities, we installed a nest box several years ago and have been delighted to have an owl or two spend each winter in our backyard. We've had different owl individuals over the years, and we can tell because some of the owls are the red morph, like this one, who's taking a late afternoon nap, and this one who's a gray morph. A couple of years now we've had two owls, so we've had a pair, and we only know that because they're two different morphs. But no owls have raised young in our nest box yet. Maybe this is the year. It brings us so much pleasure to watch them from our kitchen window, peering out of the box, warming up in the early morning hours of sun, or looking around the yard intently at dusk, listening for a mouse scurrying in the tall native grass we have growing in the backyard. Each fall, we clean out the nest box in preparation for their arrival. They had lined the bottom of the box with dried grass, and we found pellets, bones, and feathers, including feathers of an unlucky blue jay and cardinal, among other birds. And it is sad to think that the birds we see at our feeders are the owl's next meal, but it's important to support the raptors who ensure a healthy ecosystem. We do have two dead trees in our yard that we have left for the birds. Both trees have been excavated by red-bellied woodpeckers who raised families in the cavities for several years until the tree became too uninhabitable, even for the woodpeckers. And then we put up a nest box, which doubles as a roosting shelter in the winter. Native shrubs are also an important source of food, as well as cover for birds and wildlife in the winter. Evergreen Inkberry holly, a cousin of the American holly, not only retains its green leaves all year, its berries also persist throughout the winter. Birds such as the Swainson's thrush depend on these berries for energy and sustenance. Berries make up most of their diet in the winter. Winterberry holly, another member of the holly family, has red berries. Like Inkberry holly, this plant is dioecious, which means there are separate male and female plants. On the left is the male flower housing the pollen on its anthers. On the right, the female flowers have a stigma on the tip of the style. The stigma awaits the delivery of the pollen by small native bees. Both the male and the female plant are needed for fertilization, but only the female will bear the fruit. And unlike Inkberry holly, Winterberry holly is deciduous. Its leaves will drop in the fall, but the red berries will remain on the branches for birds to eat throughout the winter. I was delighted to see Winterberry holly, Inkberry holly, and an oak tree deliberately planted in the landscaping of this highway business. Sweet pepper bush, another common native New Jersey shrub, can be easily recognized in winter by its dried fruit that resemble peppercorns. The seeds within are consumed by many birds, including this American goldfinch. They hold and crack the small hard seed in their strong beak. Their flexible, ridged tongue manipulates and discards the shell while extracting the meat. This brightly colored male housefinch, like its cousin, the American goldfinch, also has a small yet stout and strong bill made for cracking open hard seeds, such as those of sweet pepperbush. Before sweet pepperbush develops its seed pods enjoyed by goldfinches in winter, it develops sweet-smelling flowers in the summer that attract a variety of pollinating insects, including soldier beetles, which feed on the pollen, and spice bush swallowtail butterflies, which feed on the nectar. These pollinators ensure pollination, which leads to fertilization, which results in the fruit. The sweet fragrance gives this plant its second common name, summer sweet. And as the fruit matures, so do the seeds developing inside each round fruit capsule. American cranberry bush, also called cranberry bush viburnum, is a rounded deciduous shrub featuring white lacy flower clusters, which bloom April through May. The flower nectar attracts bees and butterflies. Conspicuous drooping red edible berries mature in fall and are a valued food source for birds in fall and winter. American cranberry bush is a host plant for butterfly and moth caterpillars, including spring azure. American cranberry bush prefers acidic soil and needs moisture for optimum growth. You can plant it in shrub borders, as a hedge, or in naturalized areas of your yard. And coralberry is a dense suckering shrub. The spring flowers provide nectar for bees, wasps, and flies. The caterpillars of the moths, snowberry clearwing, and hummingbird clearwing feed on the foliage of coralberry. The red berries that persist throughout most of the winter provide food for birds, including bobwhite quail and robin. Cutting the shrub back to the ground in spring will promote a bushier growth form. This is a great bush for insects and wildlife. And northern bayberry is an upright, multi-trunked, semi-evergreen native shrub with narrow evergreen leaves. And female plants will produce small waxy berries that offer a fall and winter food source for many species of birds, including bobwhite quail, ruffed grouse, eastern meadowlark, gray catbird, red-bellied woodpeckers, and migratory swallows. And this flock of tree swallows descends on this large grouping of northern bayberry shrubs and devours the fruit. This important food source provides much needed energy as the birds prepare for their journey south for the winter. Northern bayberry is an important host plant for the caterpillars of Columbia silk moth and other species. And because of its late winter leaf retention, it also provides good protective cover for winter wildlife. This gray catbird is eyeing the ripe red berries on this winged sumac as it displays its beautiful fall foliage. Winged sumac berries are an important food source for birds in winter. The berries are generally low in crude protein, fats, and calcium, but nonetheless provides a vital food source in fall and winter when other food is scarce. American robins rely on the berries during the winter too, as does the brown thrasher, who benefits from sumac berries in winter. All of these trees and shrubs we've talked about are native to New Jersey. Native plants provide the most benefits because native plants and native wildlife co-evolved. Native animals have just the right adaptations, just the right tools to be able to find, extract, digest, and metabolize the food offered by native plants with minimal investment in energy. So look to nature for inspiration. Get to know the trees and shrubs growing in your nearby woodlands. There are some non-native plants that also provide benefits to wildlife that are acceptable minimally to add to your Jersey-friendly yard, but invasive species, however, are absolutely unacceptable in a Jersey-friendly wildlife garden. If you want to offer more cover for birds, in addition to native trees and shrubs, you can create brush piles in your yard for a quick escape. This Cooper's hawk was thwarted this time, but she'll be back. You may think brush piles look like a messy pile of sticks, but I encourage you to think of a brush pile as part of your overall bird-friendly landscape, an important component within your backyard wildlife sanctuary. This brush pile provides cover, shelter, and protection for winter wildlife. No need to mulch the leaves or send them to the curb. Gently rake or blow them into your garden beds, where the Cecropia moth and spice bush swallowtail caterpillars will spend the winter. The fallen leaves offer insulation to the soil and a layer of protection for our hibernating reptiles, all of whom are an important part of the ecosystem. By leaving your perennial stem standing, birds can continue to forage for seeds from the seed heads of last summer's flowers. Along with native trees, shrubs, and perennials, think about adding a feeder station to your wildlife garden. Feeders can supplement nature's food and can make the difference between life and death for many birds during winter. Black oil sunflower seeds are preferred by many birds, including our beautiful cardinals. And this purple finch is feeding on smaller thistle seeds. Peanuts are also a favorite and provide high fat and protein content. A downy woodpecker and a Carolina wren tolerate each other at the feeder in these extenuating circumstances of a cold, snowy day. On cold winter days, unfrozen water can be difficult for birds and wildlife to find. Having a heated bird bath available means the birds will have a steady source of fresh, clean water. Turn your yard into a refuge for wildlife in winter. Visit jerseyyards.org and use the Jersey Friendly Yards plant database to find just the right plants for your yard. And you'll be rewarded daily by nature's beauty. Many thanks to these wonderful photographers who kindly shared their amazing photos. And I'm happy to take any questions, and you can also feel free to reach out to me anytime at education@soildistrict.org. Thank you very much for coming tonight.
She's turn it off. Can I show next to you or what?
Yeah. How do we get that?
He does, and she has to turn her thing off.
Oh, do you want me to stop sharing?
Yeah, that would be great. Okay, we're going to ask you some questions. Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you, Becky. That was inspiring. And
Excellent. You're so
your
welcome.
photography is sensational. The little Polyphemus moth caterpillar and the common
Thank you.
type-
I have to also give credit to that list of photographers who also loaned me several photos for this program. So together we made a little menagerie, told a little story about wildlife in the backyard.
It's wonderful. It makes me more excited about spring when some of these shrubs and things are going to be leafing out and doing all kinds of good stuff.
Yeah.
Jess, I think as Jesse and I listened to this, all I could think was, we second that motion and we second that motion, and you're right about that, and you're right about this. One thing I thought to say, you were talking about, trees that suddenly appear in your yard. You didn't put them there. We've got some willow oaks. We moved here in 1989. I don't think we had any willow oaks at all. And a few appeared, I guess, placed there by blue jays. And what's amazing is how big they've gotten so quickly. The wonderful leaves, it's a wonderful tree, and it just, I think it's one of our favorite trees in the yard. It just arrived by itself with the help of some blue jays. It's, as you pointed out, the leaves are especially beautiful. One of your photos showed this. The leaves are so beautiful in fall, and they're so numerous. It's wonderful to see.
I agree.
What do you?
Yeah, sure. We have a few questions.
Someone asked if you could only choose one medium-sized evergreen tree. The question said you might want to choose a shrub, but I'll let you take it whatever you want. Which one will you recommend? If someone could only plant one, they have a very small yard, I guess, and they want to have an evergreen. Which would you choose? What would you advise?
Right. I guess the key word is medium. Not exactly sure what medium means, but I featured my favorite tree, and I think I went on and on about it. And I had lots of different birds featured eating the berries, which are actually cones, but they're tiny and round and they look like berries. It's the Eastern Red Cedar. I just love that tree so much. It can take the place of all of the non-native or very cultivated privacy border type plants that are being sold from nurseries. It grows, full and lush, and it's green, and it has food for birds and shelter and wind control, a natural privacy border, a natural fence, and the birds will plant them for you.
Yes, that's true.
I just love that one.
It's a tough plant too. It's
Yeah.
it couldn't be easier to grow. If you've got sun, I guess you can.
Yep, you don't need to do anything to it. It just grows on its own.
Yeah, it's a little underrated, I think, too, by
Yeah.
folks, because it doesn't bloom. It doesn't look spectacular, but it's a wonderful plant in so many ways. Yeah, we might choose the same one. Jessie went to the other computer so she could read the chat box while we listen to you.
Oh, this is high tech in the Connor household. Good for it. We have a question from Carol, and she's leaving for the month of March and asks if she can cut back her gardens before she goes.
She's leaving.
Yes,
And she wants to know if she can cut back.
So
Well,
can
she
cut back
can.
her gardens in February.
Yeah, I mean, Yes, if you have to, absolutely you can. The reason why we promote, try not to cut your stems that you've been feeding the birds with all winter long. So good for you, Carol, for leaving them this long. If you have to cut them back in February, you have to cut them back in February. If you can, everybody else out there, if you can wait a little bit longer, April, May is probably a long time too, but try to cut them high. Not only will you keep some of the stem intact, but next year's growth has a little bit of a natural staking already. If you leave the stiff stems, cut them high, and then the parts that you do cut, just leave right there on the ground if you can. They'll either have overwintering insects that will still hopefully manage another month or two until the weather warms up, or that vegetation will decompose on the spot and offer nutrients to the soil, as well as almost like a vegetative mulch, keeping weeds down, keeping your soil moist. So you can cut now, but try to leave everything there. And if you're not Carol, wait.
Okay, we have another question from Adrian, wanting to know if there are benefits for other wildlife outside of your talk is mostly focused on birds and insects, and she's wondering, are there other wildlife that could be helped by a Jersey-friendly yard? Do the trees and shrubs you're talking about attract or help raccoons and possums and deer, etc.?
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for emphasizing animals other than birds and insects. And absolutely, the raccoon could take shelter in the same cavity in that old oak tree that the great horned owl maybe was nesting in. Possums, same thing. We're very lucky. We have raccoons and possums in our backyard because we have plenty of trees for them. We also have, amazingly, we live on not far from a very, very busy road, and we have deer that come through. We were just watching 4 of them in our yard last night. I know people are like, deer, but I feel like that too when they eat my shrubs, but when they're not eating my shrubs, I'm like, oh dear, they're just so beautiful, big mammals. That's nice. So yeah, if you try to kind of mimic nature, replicate the natural plant communities that are right outside your door and all those preserved natural spaces, go take a walk, and I try to identify the trees and shrubs that are there and plant those in your backyard as much as possible. Box turtles are another wildlife species that will benefit from wildlife Jersey-friendly backyard.
I have a question for you. I love seeing the pictures of your screech owls. I'm pretty jealous. How do you keep squirrels out of screech owl nest boxes?
It's actually really easy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's easy to keep them out. And the reason why is I promise you, if you put up a screech owl nest box, you will get a screech owl. They're actually prevalent in our suburban communities. They're just nocturnal, so we don't see them. So we don't really know that they're out there. But we put it on a single post. I'm going to say it's probably a 12-foot post, 12 to 15-foot post. I'm terrible with measurements. My husband did that. So, but pretty tall, probably at least 3 feet of it is in the ground. And then there's a big baffle. There's a big baffle that's right over the post. So if a raccoon were trying to climb up there, it's a very long baffle. There's no way. And nobody's disturbed. We've had that box for probably 7 years now, something like that. Knock on wood, never had an issue with any predators trying to get in it. Yeah, we get them every year.
I'm inspired. I have one in a tree, on a tree, and it's just a squirrel box.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, it will be a squirrel box if it's just on a tree.
Mhm.
Okay. There was a question about how do you,
Eastern Red Cedar one.
no, wait a minute. Sorry. Oh, I know. How can you tell the difference between a male and a female spice bush?
The flower itself.
Right.
I did a little Google search. I've never figured that out. It's apparently pretty tough. Do you have a trick to it?
Well, if you have fruit, you know, you have the female. If you only have one, or if you have two like me and neither of them get fruit, then either I have two females or two males. So you'll have to get a little hand lens or a little loop to go out there and look really, really carefully at the flowers and see if you can determine if you're looking at flowers that have, you know, a stigma, sticky stigma on a style, or little anthers with pollen. To see if you've got your male or a female, but they will flower. They will both flower, so you can go check that out. So that's one way to tell.
Okay, Becky, I think we're going to make a couple of announcements just to remind everybody, but then unless you have something more to say, we're going to let you go. That was a wonderful, wonderful, inspiring talk.
I want to thank you both so much for inviting me to present, and thanks so much to the Fiedlers as well. You're amazing leaders of your chapter, and I aspire to be an amazing leader of the Jersey Shore chapter. And for all those Jersey Shore folks who are out there tonight, I apologize for not doing Jersey Shore chapter webinars, but I know that there's so many other chapters out there that are providing these amazing webinars, and everybody can attend every webinar. So please do take advantage of these wonderful webinars offered by all the chapters of the Native Plant Society of New Jersey. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. We are going to let's get a couple of announcements in before we end this. First, I have to say thanks to Mike Jacob, who's the wizard behind the scene, who saved me with that. But my mic died on my Chromebook, so we had to improvise. Thank you, Mike. Don't end the meeting yet, though. I just want to remind everybody, there's a nice little segue. Becky has provided a nice little segue to us, because our next meeting is a field trip where we're going to be looking at many of the shrubs and trees she just described. And we'll be talking about how to identify them. Most won't be fully leafed out, but that makes it even more fun to try to identify things. And that's what we'll be doing in late March. We'll be sending out a constant contact about that field trip, and looking at some of the plants Becky mentioned, and maybe some other plants. We'll see. Maybe we'll be seeing some birds. Those photos showed so beautifully. And that's about it. I think we're going to say good night now to everyone out there. Thank you all for coming and joining us and putting up with that first 3 or 4 minutes when things weren't working so well. We're glad you're here, and we're really grateful to Becky for such an inspiring talk. Thank you so much. And Mike, you could shut us down now, and we'll say good night to everybody.
Okay, good night all.